bringing you back to the reality and a better base of knowledge. What do I know is true? I have self-diagnosed myself for this. This is not an official diagnosis, but I really suffer from
hippopotamonstrosesquipaliophobia, the fear of long words.
If one of these assumptions turns out to be wrong, your house of cards is going to fall apart.
without fail.
Welcome to episode 9 of the Komodo podcast. My name is Udo, and this is Kim.
Hello.
Why the hell did you start a podcast?
Well, you have yourself to blame for that one, I think.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. I love this podcast, so I'm very happy that we are doing it. I think it started with you and I meeting on the Discord server where we were playing a game together, a League of Legends ARAM game, and we really immediately kind of had a connection very quickly. And for the next couple of days, we just ended up talking a lot and playing a lot. And I want to say it was like in 3 days or something in a row. And you kept bringing up the idea that, man, these conversations are so good, we like them so much that we wish they were recorded, or that we had something written down so that we could refer to it in the future, because we didn't want to interrupt the flow of talking and each other. So we didn't want to stop and write. And
within these 3 days, or what?
Yeah, exactly. So within these 3 days, we kept saying, well, you particularly kept saying something about a podcast. We should have a podcast. So there should be a podcast like this. And at the third day, I finally got fed up because you kept saying it, and I didn't give you much of a reaction, I guess. So I guess you kept saying it maybe to get a reaction out of me. I'm not sure what happened. And so the third time, I just opened up, what was it, a Google Doc sheet or something, and just started writing down, like, what would a podcast look like if we were to do one? You know, how difficult would it be? What would it require? And yeah, what kind of investment are we looking at here, right? So just really mostly to kind of like shut us up, to be honest, you know, in the beginning, to just like, because I don't know the first thing. You don't know the first thing about podcasting until we started either, right? Did you listen to podcasts?
Only to Lex Friedman, basically.
Okay.
No.
For a long time?
No, not really.
Wow.
2 years or
Okay.
so.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've been listening to podcasts for, decades. Since really the beginning when they started taking off. So, but I'd never thought about a reason of why I would ever have one until we realized that there was actually some value to be made just for ourselves, for nobody else's reason, you know, even if no one else ever listened. If we recorded these things and then we could refer to our conversations or refer to our thoughts and ideas and kind of go, hey, what do you mean by that? Can you expand on that? And then we have something to refer to that would have value just to you and I right off the bat. Correct?
Yeah, that's really useful for two people who tend to forget a lot.
Speak for yourself. I don't remember that. I don't remember agreeing to that.
Of course not, because you forgot it already. How are we structured?
We are quite... You're German. We're quite German in our approach. It's very methodical. We make critical thinking, and we make critical thinking. We think about things critically, is what I meant to say, about each and every problem that we have and each and every solution that it requires and what the best path is for that. And then if you're going back to kind of an ontological approach, we go back to we go to Gemba, right, as it's called. You go to the source of the information, and then we usually try to see where we agree and where we disagree on those kind of processes. And then that's how we build our podcast forward, right? On the things we agree on, we adopt, we move forward, but then we try to prioritize our different ideas.
Okay, be a little bit more specific. Like what problems, for example, occur?
Okay, so we, for those who don't know, for example, when you're making a podcast, if you're putting it on Apple or on Spotify, there isn't really like an algorithm that YouTube has, for example, where it recommends videos or even autoplays the next video, which means that a lot of the traffic on these platforms, because there's no algorithm to discover, you're going to have to be searched for. So, you know, the podcasts that do well usually have, you know, big personality names that people already know or whatever. And this makes a big following, etc. So Yeah, if you are wanting to get discovered, because you and I are not known, we are not, we don't do anything publicly. If anything, we are quite the opposite.
So
Then
what's the solution?
the solution is you get on a platform that has an algorithm that so that you can be discovered. And there's two different avenues. The way we saw it, it was either the social media avenue or it was a YouTube avenue. We looked at social media first, and we had decided that most social medias do not transfer well, and the data seems to show that most people who see your video or clip or hook or short or or brief or whatever you call it, that's most people don't then after that click and go and listen to a podcast. There are people who do, of course, but the conversion rate is poor.
Well, I remember some other problems with other social media platforms. Do
Expand?
you? Well, I wanted you to expand. What problems did we
Well,
face? Getting banned, getting hacked.
Yeah, that's one thing. But bring that up in a second. But I wanted to finish or talk about this one, which was that. So if you're focusing on getting discovered, and you're trying to do it on social media, maybe you make a TikTok account and you try to get people to click from your TikTok and end up on, a TikTok attention is very short, and a long podcast format like we have it, which is, an hour and a half, 2 hours, somewhere between there. We try to keep our episodes too. If you have someone who's watching something on TikTok where you scroll literally every couple of seconds, because most videos that people are not interested in. So you have 1 to 3 seconds to grab their attention before they scroll out of your video. So that's not going to translate very well to a 2-hour podcast, long form listening podcast, So that's something that we didn't really believe in the social media kind of route. One, we're not that interested in promoting. It's not just, we like talking to each other and making the podcast. So, instead of doing the parts we don't like doing so much, we try to focus on producing where we do like doing the things that, and social media wasn't part of that. Neither of us cared. And so that left us with another option, which is YouTube and the YouTube algorithm. So yeah, we wanted to take advantage of that so that we can get discovered as a strategic move. But then you're introducing the problem, of course, that YouTube requires a video. And so we have a audio only podcast so far, you and I, until just the other day, actually this week, we released the first video on YouTube where we have made a what's it called, Udo? A Python Unity visualization.
Okay, so Python is a programming language. Unity is a program to make video games. Okay, and I use that on the side, and I figured, I might as well use my skills to do something for the podcast.
So you were thinking so you were thinking like this. Tell me if I'm wrong. We were thinking, because we're going to want to take use of that algorithm, we're going to have to start producing videos. How do we produce videos the most quickest and fastest and streamlined way? This was the answer, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for translating my thoughts.
You're welcome. And this is replicable, because we can then, how does it work? You're the one who's done this, so you have to tell us, you're the expert on our writing code here, whatever. So we take the audio on the recording, right? The one we're recording right now, when we press start, we get 2 audio tracks, one that is my voice and one that is yours. And then we attach those to our characters on YouTube, and we've made characters. I am a cartoon version of myself, easy. And you are a robot, huh?
Yeah. So basically, just drag and drop the 2 audio files in there, and then there's a record button, and then you just wait for the whole video to be played, and after that you can upload it. So it's really easy, streamlined, and easy to use in the future. Yeah,
and then. So tell us, if we have a guest, for example, like we are planning on having more guests coming on the podcast in the future. We're very excited about it. And when those guests come on, we can make a character that they request that they want to look like, and then we'll add them into the video in YouTube. So it's not that big a deal. It's pretty easy to streamline. We have AI to generate any kind of character that we can use then, and there are other AIs that can make them pose in different various ways, so that you can kind of recreate the character with many different versions of it. So not difficult, very quickly and easy to do. So we're so excited that we've made this to be as basically lazy as we could be, huh?
We have to, because
Yeah.
we have bigger plans.
Oh, do we? What kind of plans do we have?
Well, cross-pollination is one of the plans. So, getting more people on the podcast, interviewing people who have interesting thoughts and opinions, and trying to learn from them.
Yeah, and that's why this podcast exists, right? Is that we're always trying to educate ourselves. We want to learn as much as possible. And then so if we're doing this process and we're going to try to, figure out all the things that we have questions and we haven't gotten answers to, or we want to know more, or if we want to find out about what you think or I think, it's fun. So
yeah, there's so much to learn, and I think education system is not perfect. There's definitely ways to improve, and I think our podcast contributes to making the education system a little bit better, just by being curious and trying to learn new things. Like, for example, today I learned that the Yakuza is actually partially philanthropic, but also kind of totalitarian. So that's something new that I learned from you. And in the future, when we have guests, then we might learn some new things from them.
what did you learn? Tell us about this thing. Just as a side quest, real quick. Sorry.
So the Yakuza helped Japanese citizens after an earthquake or a flood. I forgot already.
Yeah, earthquake.
Yeah, and supplied them with medical aid and water and food faster than the government. Just imagine, like, your government is worse at helping you than the mafia is.
Yeah, when you're powerful and effective, you can, just depends on what where you're putting all that energy towards, and you can do that to, save people's lives and be acting much quicker with the response time than the whole dang government, which is are supposed to be there for pretty much that. I mean, if the government's not there to like protect the people and make sure everybody has rights and liberty enforced, and whatever, then what is it there for? Sure isn't to take taxes, right?
What's the conclusion then? Be like Yakuza?
No, no. No, one can be philanthropic without being in Yakuza, Udo, okay?
I guess that's a new thing that I learned today.
Yeah. So,
So learning new things is one of the goals of this podcast. And in the future, we want to have a Discord server, an active Discord server as well. So people can go there and discuss, share ideas, and think about things together.
Yeah, we thought about our whys of why, really, why are we making this podcast? And in the beginning, one of the first things we did when we first started recording, Udo and I, is that you turn on the microphone, and for some odd reason, even though Udo is very transparent, very straightforward, very German, and I also make my emotions quite available to read. I always try to talk to Udo as straightforward as I can. And we have great communication as a result of it. What is a bad reason to start a podcast versus a good one? What do you think so far? No, I want to hear you first, and I want to see what we got.
Okay, I think one of the worst reasons is to just make money.
Yeah, because there's no fulfillment in it.
That's one thing, but it's also not as valuable to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like for some podcasts, you can kind of see that this guy is just trying to make some money instead of providing a good product or service, which his podcast should be.
Right. If you come across as a car salesman, people will smell it on you, and you will be, your reputation and your credibility will be wrecked forever. And we thought about that quite a bit, right? That we wanted to align our why for the podcast and come across as genuine as possible, because we wanted to make sure it was genuine. In the beginning, we were recorded first 3 episodes, and it was impossible not to sound and put off as come across as kind of car salesman-y. We were putting on a show, right? And it lacked content, and it didn't resonate with us. So we actually made the executive decision to cut the first 3 episodes just to never be released. So actually, the first episode on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and whatever else is actually 4th episode in reality, but we renamed them, cut the first 3 when we ended up on this format that we wanted here. And we did it because for some reason, as straightforward as you and I are, we put on kind of a mask and a show, and it was really difficult to not come off as car salesman-y, because we were not used to speaking on a microphone. And even though you're trying not to, that's when you're listening back, you're like, oh, I do sound not genuine. So we're thinking really hard and long on our why we're making this podcast in the first place. And for me, and I want to hear your opinion on this, Udo. For me, it was, I really, really want this information to be out there, because when I was younger and growing up, I, at many times of my life, did not have access to high kind of quality people around me where I could get good information and good decision making from, And if I had discovered a podcast, for example, which would have been very likely, because like I said, I've been listening to podcasts for, so more than 20 years, almost 20 years probably. And I could have found a podcast like this that would have kind of armed me and guarded me against, stupid opinions, because you cannot, when you're young, for example, you cannot discern what is good information and what is bad information, who's giving you good data, who's giving you bad data. You take your best guess at it, and you hang on to somebody you think is smart or wise, and then maybe you even idolize them. Ideally, you should never idolize anybody. People are not infallible. They can make mistakes. So grab points and ideas from people, but don't idealize them as an infallible god. Don't, you make sure that you grab little concepts from people here and there, and then form your own opinion on things. And anyway, for me, if I could have discovered a podcast like this that would have told me about logical fallacies, and maybe about how to invest or finances, or maybe how to, get good friends from bad friends, or any little thing, that would have been super useful. But it didn't really exist. And I think that, if it doesn't, then you have to kind of create it. And I met you. You're another person who I can genuinely tell is very similar to me in so many ways, and then you differ from me in other interesting ways. But you come from the same point of view that I do, which is we're trying to go to Gemba. We go to the source of the information. We try to make the best educated deductions and inductions from that data, right? And then we just make our choices based on our experiences from that point on, right? And our biases.
Yeah.
And then you come up with a conclusion. I come up with a conclusion. And the interesting thing is, while we don't always agree on why we do it, or where the start or the middle of it is, we always usually end up with the same answer very often. Wouldn't you say?
Or we learn something new.
Or we learn something new. Because if I know that you're truthful about how you talk to me about why you think that you do, I can always break it down. We can always go down in steps and go, okay, but okay, I see. This is where you differ and this is where I differ, and we break apart here. But at the end of it, if I respect you enough and you do to me, knowing that we're just trying to get to the right answer at the end of the day, truthfully, we try to get out of our own way as much as possible. But discerning what is true and false is so freaking difficult because of being a human being. And then on top of that, dealing with imperfect information, on top of that, dealing with, that's that we have just the curiosity to try to explore these things and talk about them, not as experts, but rather as two people exploring information
and trying to figure out
try to navigate it. Yeah. Try to come up with what is the best answer. What do you think? What do I think? I mean, you and I, we compare so much. Right before this recording, you and I were comparing our thinking about how to invest and stuff like that. And it's so interesting, the strategy that you talk about and the strategy I talk about, and we learn each and every single time. So that's why we partially have a podcast. Part for me is this information would have been great if I had myself and I had heard this at some younger age, that I could have then used that information to bounce me ahead a little bit. Then that would have been great. Many of the kind of pains of navigating life is could be learned maybe through wisdom of others, if they can come across as genuine and like, look, I was in your position, these are the mistakes I made, or these are how I navigated that, or how I thought about this, and then you can advance your position quicker, right? That's how we provide value a little bit on this podcast. Not that we think we know everything. In fact, quite exactly the opposite. We realize that the more information you learn, the more you realize how little you know. And it's really fun to learn. So let's go. Let's go.
That's why it's so important to learn how to listen. And not to brag or so, but I think we are kind of doing a good job. I remember the other day when we were talking about UBI, we were trying to discuss that, and we had I had a thought, and you were kind of stopping me in that thought and trying to get me back to the smaller steps, because I was kind of thinking too far, basically. And this really helped me, because I didn't realize that a lot of times when you're just on your own and thinking stuff, then you're making a lot of assumptions, and then it really helps to have a friend who's there to kind of get you back to reality again. and that helps you to think more solidly, because if you have a lot of assumptions, then it's kind of like a house of cards. Because if one of these assumptions turns out to be wrong, then your house of cards is going to fall apart. So it really helps to have this kind of checks and balances from friends. And I hope that this podcast and the community that we will create on the Discord server will help people.
Yeah. And for you, that's a big part of your why. Is that right?
Yeah, because I see a lot of potential, and oftentimes people don't live up to their potential. There's a lot of things that hold them back, and maybe there's one or two things that people can learn on this podcast to remove these obstacles from their life. For example, the episode on logical fallacies that we had, and people can apply in their own life and see when, for example, someone is using the argument of the logical fallacy of authority, which happens a lot, and then kind of become immune to that and not get misguided. And
bringing you back to the reality and a better base of knowledge. What do I know is true?
Yeah, and then hopefully people realize more of their potential.
You want people who are listening to this podcast to realize more of their potential.
Yeah.
And together, right? Through the community.
Yeah.
Because tell me if I'm wrong, but I wanted to hear you say it, but I'm going to coax it out of you now anyway. But a big part of this is because you wanted to have a platform, a community where people can come and really go and think about things in a different way, or think about things and talk about it to other people and go, hey, can I bounce this idea off of you? What do you think? And then through critical thinking and questioning, what do you really know? You can get to great kind of conclusions or great furtherings in your strategy, and then you can adapt from there. So it's important. I know from leadership courses, for example, that when you have two people in a room and they spitball ideas on what could be a solution, if a solution is not mentioned or thought of between the two of them, that a solution can never be part of the solution, right? It's never going to be adapted if it's not mentioned in the first place. What we know is that if you introduce more people to a meeting and you have 6 or 8 people, for example, and you force everybody to come up with solutions for spitball, no matter how stupid, okay, or dumb, or unimplementable. You still say it, you still write it down, because the point of the point of an idea, the exercise, is to get the best potential solution that's in there, and it needs to be mentioned so that you can disqualify it. And we know that you need to introduce more people into that meeting so that there will be more options on that, because the more people you have in the meeting, there's going to be more answers on that board, with diminishing returns, of course. But two is too small, and maybe 6 to 8 people throwing up ideas on a whiteboard, for example, and you try to spitball as much as you can in 15, 17, 18 minutes. Then that can be part of the solution, and that solution could be really invaluable before, but so that's something that's really important, and I think to think about the strategy. If you want to get to better solutions or better data, know some of those strategies. And we don't claim that we know any of them, but we learn. We're interested and curious, so we'll go through a bunch of different kinds of topics for our podcast, whatever's interesting. But it'll be different topics, and it'll be educational. So just because that's how we are as people, yeah.
Yeah.
So how are we structured, for example? That's something people have been asking us before. How do you make a podcast? And for us, we are trying to take the most streamlined approach always. We have a... Oh my God, here we go. Here comes the cancel of this episode already. Ready? We kind of have adopted a methodology from Elon, right? And Elon has a couple of steps, Udo. What are those steps on how we kind of look at the way we're doing our process of the podcast? We have, go ahead,
Okay,
5 steps.
so,
and he says there's 5 steps and they are in order, correct?
Yeah, they are in order.
So and what happens? Yeah, go ahead.
Elon Musk has this 5-step process, or 5-step algorithm to improve processes, and that's what we try to apply to the podcast as well. So especially episode production right now for the next coming months. Step 1 of this algorithm is question the requirements. So always asking yourself, is this something that we need, or is that something that can be removed? Step 2 is try to delete as many parts and processes as possible. Like, for example, when we're recording, for example, then we don't want to do much audio engineering after that, like fixing the audio so it sounds good. But if we have the microphones set up correctly, so the audio quality is good, or your studio setup right now, which is better than before. And the next thing is step 3 is simplify and optimize. Number 4 is accelerate cycle time. So do it as quickly as possible. And number 5 is automate. So one way that we automate, for example, is that we have a little Python script that automatically presses buttons in the correct order in the audio processing tool that we use, which is Audacity. So it does all the editing automatically for us.
Yeah, we can just double click it, and then I can go and come back.
Eat something.
Yeah.
And 10-20 minutes later, it's finished.
Yeah, I will process 3 audio files and put all the filters and things that we do to sound as good as we can.
Okay, despite that, there are still problems that will be unexpected. What are some of the biggest problems that we've faced so far?
Yeah, we have a couple of things that's happened, and we have a couple of things that we've had to learn. I think let's get. I think you're probably sneakily referring to us getting hacked very early on in the podcast creation. And also our Instagrams and all of our social media that we did try to create got instantly banned in one version or another. And sometimes when you think something's going to be a non-issue, like creating an account, you would think it would be simple. We are actually not able to set up some of these social media accounts for various reasons. Some of them they don't.
Reddit.
So our Reddit, for example, we were not allowed to have our subreddit based on our account being too new. We were supposed to have an account with a certain amount of, I think, karma and a certain amount of age on it to be able to lead a subreddit. We didn't want to put it on, a different account that maybe was older because we wanted to be belonging to the correct user account that we both share access to and that we both have the name to, Komodo Podcast. So yeah, as of right now, we don't have an Instagram. We tried making one, and on the same moment when I clicked create, it gave us an email that said welcome to our account, and the second email was you're banned. And we actually never got to log into the account a single time. It was just instantly just a deny. I don't know. We don't know why. What happened? There was never any excuse or anything written. So yeah, to this day we don't have one. And so we're really, really happy about creating. So we realized this. These are not platforms that are wanting us on there. Clearly, number one. Number two, we didn't really want to be on social media either, right? Because like we said, neither of us were common users of it. It was only going to be serving one purpose, which was to get listeners. And it wasn't very genuine. We're constantly trying to be genuine. We're also not trying to do things that we don't feel like doing. So we're going to make the podcast last a very long time. We're only going to do that by doing the things that we love and want to do, which is talk to each other and learn stuff. It is not posting on social media necessarily. So putting that together, we realized, where do we hang out? Where are we recording our podcast right now? And that is on Discord. And we're using a Discord bot that is recording this very podcast that you're listening to. It is so streamlined. It produces 2 audio tracks for us. And then we just put them together and, we package them up and put them on a Google Drive. And then we can both have access to all the files to do editing and clips and hooks and intros out of. And
yeah, I guess the audience should know that we use Discord because it's hard for us to meet up in person. Like I live in Germany and he lives in
Czech Republic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So because of that, and also where we are hanging out right now is Discord to record this very episode, we realize we are always on Discord communities all the time anyway, and Discord's always been very good to us. So we just set up a Discord community on the server, which you can find in the podcast's description link and on Linktree. And we hope you join us and join the podcast community and let us know what you think about both the episodes that we released so far, what you like, what you don't like, but also come and talk to us. Let's have interesting conversations. We're both looking forward to meeting the people who are listeners. So come and interact. We were very much looking forward to it. And we'll be here for a while, yeah?
Hell yeah.
So the other thing people may or may not know is that listening to this episode already, if you have listened to the other episodes or not, we have actually broken the average recorded episodes on a created podcast, which is at 7, about 7. Is the most podcasts don't make it past episode 7. So we are now recording on episode 9 today, and we have so much more to talk about. We're so excited. We're only getting started. We've only set up all these processes so that we can make and produce episodes as quickly as possibly, as efficiently as possible, with as much content and much fun stuff as possible, so that we enjoy making the podcast just for our own sakes, if nothing else. And if there's other people who want to join us, then if you're like-minded, then that'll be super, super cool to meet more people, because I feel like we're in a divided world right now where we're not supposed to talk to the other people politically or anything else. And while we would say you and I, we both agree that you're quite a bit more conservative in your thinking. I'm quite more liberal. But yet,
100%, yeah.
yeah, and that's what makes some of these discussions so exciting is that, yeah, again, like I said, we try to get to the right answer. We're not trying to be stubborn about our opinion. And because we both are not, we're just trying to come up with the right answer and challenge the other person so that we can be sold on the idea, right? We're both just selfishly trying to do that. And that makes it so that it's a fair fight in that sense. We're not trying to be married to ideas for the sake of being married to them. We're trying to defend our positions until it no longer makes sense, and then we change, right? We update, right? You grow, you adapt, you learn. Otherwise, you're a dummy. We don't want to be no dummies. Scrub. We don't. Oh, I can't sing that probably. Don't want to get in trouble. So, yeah, we learned that social media was difficult. Getting hacked was difficult, but we grew from it. We set up a bunch more security, the highest security of everything that we can. We thought quite a bit about it and set up authenticators and everything else that you have to do in the modern world to make sure your stuff is good. And as a result, we think that we have a much better head start on that. We didn't have to learn the hard way by having the podcast up for 3 years and then getting hacked because of lax, passwords or whatever. Now we're up to game and we're only getting just started. So these are good things. We look forward to learning, even if it's hard at the time. Getting hacked was rough because they're just relentless. They just keep coming back because it's so effortless when they run their programs to do those things. But for you to get back in control and get these accounts back, it can be painful. They can get there. There's so many different ways of getting their dirty claws in there.
Yeah, that's why we're saying we're in terms of social media, we're trying to reduce our area of attack, so there's less points of possible failure. That's why we don't have TikTok, we don't have Instagram, we don't have Reddit. We're just focusing on YouTube, Spotify, and Discord. So it's just a handful of things that we have to check on instead of like way too many
Spreading
things
too thin.
to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and for two reasons, like that. One, we don't want to do it. It's not fun for us, which means it'll be not genuine again, right? We won't be enjoying that process. So we kind of feel like we should just focus on our strength instead, which is the stuff that we probably enjoy doing anyway. Those things seem to be tied hand in hand or whatever. Yeah.
What are our strengths and weaknesses?
What do you think? I want to hear your opinion.
Your strength is definitely talking.
I can't shut up, so if that's what you mean. What does that mean? What is my strength in talking?
It means that you're really good with words. So I'm a visual thinker. Like a lot of times when we're discussing things, and then I don't find the right words for it, but I find the right pictures for it or images, and then I pull up Microsoft Paint, and I start drawing something to explain it to you, and then at some point you get what I'm trying to draw there, and you also find words for it. And that's one way where we are quite different. Like I'm thinking visually, and Kim is rather thinking in words. I'm more conservative. Kim is libertarian, and even though we're so different, we can still like talk and discuss with each other in a civil manner. And I hope that will be kind of like an example for other people. You mentioned earlier that the world is kind of divided right now, and I think that's a bad thing. And people should be capable of coming together, even though you're disagreeing with the other person a lot. You should still be able to come together and discuss things and discuss problems and actually find a solution. And hopefully our discussions will serve as an example for that.
Yeah. Hopefully we will come through as truthful as we are and as we're trying to be as well, that we are just genuinely learning. Hopefully you'll try to learn with us, and by having discussions from two different points of views. And trying to get to the right answer, I think everybody who listens would benefit for that, because I know I would. That just automatically provides just that much more weight. It's discourse, right? Or discussions. So in a time right now where we're more divided than any time, you and I found each other, randomly on the internet and found that, we really could discuss things and not agree and still have so much value to gain from it. It's just, how could we not have a podcast, huh? I think a lot of people, they start a podcast because, they think that we're just two weirdos, two white guys or whatever, who are going to turn on a microphone and start talking. And because the very low amount of resources it costs to set up a podcast and start recording and putting it out there, the barrier to entry is extremely low. So therefore, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to try their quote unquote luck on recording a podcast. And I think for you and I, that wasn't the case. We didn't necessarily start in that direction. We kind of started in the other direction, which was we have so many great conversations that it felt like a shame that we didn't have access to, kind of listening to them, because, we were going to miss each other's points, and, maybe we get sometimes excited about things and we can discuss things in a very engaging kind of way. And we started creating from those conversations mind maps where we have written down clusters of various topics and things that we find interesting that we could bring up on the podcast and we will talk about. And
what's the purpose of these mind maps?
For inspiration and for setting up kind of a process where we can always, if we're not necessarily feeling like we are motivated by talking about something, for example, then we can do what you and I do, which is we summon the muse. We sit down, because we know that you cannot control when you get inspired or which direction you're going to go on a topic, but you can control sitting down and waiting for that muse to come. And while you're sitting there waiting, you might as well do something productive with your time. And we've decided that writing down these little mind map bubbles that then have arrows to another mind map bubble that would be, maybe a topic within the topic or a niche within a subject, for example. And then we continue going down these different paths, and you can just sit there and write down words that would be logical things that you and I probably would be interested in. So what would be an example of this, Udo?
Well, wait, I wanted to ask you, why not write it down in a Google Doc? Why did it have to be a mind map?
Yeah, so we actually started in a Google Doc, and this is because of the way I'm thinking. So I think in words, as Udo said, and you think in visuals. And I started a Google Doc, and we set it up our account to be together, and we started writing this. But you found it to be, well, one, we found the information about our podcast episodes and potential ideas scattered everywhere, right? We had so many Google Docs, it was just set up crazy, and there was different information in different docs under the wrong title and rubric, that it was just chaotic. And we had to move servers into, the joint server that we're on now. And we had realized that you do draw in MS Paint, I think something for me every single day. And and very frequently, I can explain pretty quickly on what it is that you're drawing, so that I know, what your point is that you're getting to. But so this Word documents, they kind of benefited me, but they didn't really benefit you. We needed them to be visualized so that we could see and be inspired. So we set up these mind map bubbles with color coordination, with arrow systems that are branching out, with colors that, if they are more at the core, for example, you might have a red color that is very, very strong and filled in. And as it moves further out the branch, that color of red maybe is like less, more and more faded out towards white or something. And yeah, we visit these mind maps all the time, right? To get inspiration, looking at potential topics and looking at what is it that you have been reading lately? What have you been into? What are you thinking about? And we do this to each other all the time. And then we either write some of those down, or we put them on a mind map and to visit at a later time.
Yeah, and I want to add to that the mind map basically has a central topic. For example, I'm looking at the mind map of politics right now, and then there are different branches, different topics that are going from there. So politics, one subtopic of politics is global peace and security. Another subtopic is education reform. Another subtopic is economics. Okay, and for economics, for example, there are different questions that we can go deeper into, and the economics bubble has smaller sub bubbles where we can ask ourselves questions when we're over the course of the week, when we're thinking about things. And then at the end of the week, we just sit down and write things down. So when we've been thinking about politics, then we can kind of sort our thoughts into these bubbles and put them in there and see where it fits. Like sometimes when I'm thinking about a genocide, for example, just as an example, okay, then there would, after I see news on Gaza or so, then I could at the end of the week sit down and put it into the right place in the mind map. When I have different thoughts on economics, for example, after the ECB has lowered the interest rate, then I can put my thoughts down in there, and then after some time, this mind map basically grows. And at some point, when we see that one branch is big enough to make a whole podcast episode, then we'll say, yo, this is enough. And then we'll schedule it. That's basically how we use mind maps.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, we've used this many times. And when we start looking at these different topics on the mind map, sometimes the muse will come. We will be grabbed, and usually it'll look like you screaming the very famous sentence, write that down, or I'll scream it at you, write that down, whoever's closest to something that they can write. we both shouted that at each other many a times, and then when it starts coming, we just start writing down as much as we can about those topics, and we get a bunch of sheets down on Google Docs with enough questions and materials that we either research or that we are going to ask each other. And then we, during a 2-week cycle, we usually spend 2 weeks within one kind of topic because we release episodes on a 2-week basis. We like to take a serious amount of time to discuss and talk and think about the topics that we've chosen. And we do this with great kind of care, and we write down questions for each other, and then we don't show each other the answers. So we separate the Google Sheets, we share the questions for each other, and then we spend another week writing them down and bullet point them. You don't have to write them down perfectly, but we write it down so that we know where we're headed with the conversations, what points we want to have, and make sure we don't miss something that we would regret not having recorded at a later time. So we make this also good for packing down some extra content in there. The reason why we cut some of those first 3 episodes were because they did not have the format that we had right now. We didn't feel like there's a fine line that you have to hit with your recording of the podcast, and that is the process between the flow of you and I naturally just talking to each other compared to losing in any material and it just becomes a banter between 2 friends. I think you want to make sure that you have the customer, meaning the people, you, listener, that we take the listener's point of view when that we're careful with their time. So we work on this really, really hard always, that we don't reference, inside jokes and things like that that would detract from the listening experience if you are not on the inside of those jokes. So
how much time do you spend working each week?
Currently, I'm down this week for sure. We worked much less on there. I would say this week, but usually I spend probably about 15, sometimes 16, 17 hours on the podcast a week. on average, just researching things, reading material to try to figure out some processes or streamlining some processes that we have, or think about topics. We have set up a WhatsApp chat where you and I are always kind of writing WhatsApp messages back and forth for some of these inspirations. But we also have set up, because we're obsessed with streamlining for some reason, we also set up AI for transcripts. So we actually make these episodes that we have that Craig spits out, and then we shove them into ChatGPT or one of the other ones, and we make transcripts out of those episodes. Then I take those episode transcripts, I upload them again to the Google Doc, and I use them again with the ChatGPT to write then a synopsis or a kind of a bullet pointed part of which I take that text file, and so it has access to all of the words we said during that whole episode, and then I ask it to make a synopsis, and that's where you get all of that writing that you have on the episode. So we've made it so that everything takes as little possible time as possible. We should always set it up so that if we have to do a process, we have to mostly review it and QA it and etc. And not so much the doing. Everything else we should either remove or automate, or, as Elon says.
So at this point, is this even a hobby anymore?
I think we are on a hobby amateur level, of course, because we just started off. So in that sense, yes, absolutely, because that's what people who are listening are going to think of us as well. But I would say, because of how long term we seem to be looking, we only started. We've only just released the first YouTube material. So we're only starting to be able to even be discovered, and we've already spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours setting up this podcast. So there's a tremendous amount of work, by the way, on the background. It sounds like two people who are just recording an episode, but in reality, we're spending significant amount of time setting up all these things. But because we've only written the Python script, for example, and only used it a little bit, we are going to use this for so many episodes in the future. We've only spent all this time streamlining all these processes so that we can really, really go back to making and producing these episodes as easy as possible. We're spending just as much time in the inspiration and the discussion part of the podcast as possible. And we're always looking for a new way of doing things. We're currently looking at setting up also a subscription. Maybe there is an AI subscription as well that could take some of our auto engineering portions out for what we're doing. We're spending quite a bit of time on editing. It's a process that neither you nor I like. Is that right?
Yeah. It's fun, but also pretty time consuming.
It's very time consuming. Yeah. So if we're thinking about things that we could probably reduce or remove, if we had enough, if we had an income that could pay for the subscriptions, that would be amazing to take some of those time processes out. We could just shove it through an AI, and then they automatically cut out the ums, the ahs, the big pauses, and then also audio engineers and produces a high quality sound. And they'll do all that with a transcript and a synopsis if I want it, and even also a blog post. Some of them can post just from the transcripts that they also produce. So you can also get like a blog post set up automatically. So, but these things are things we're doing manually and by hand now. It's very time consuming, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. But until we get that AI and the money for it, that's something that one of the first investments we would do if we had the income, wouldn't we? Something we're looking. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if we had more time to not edit, that means more time in good quality land of producing high quality questions. And that's what you're good at, Udo. That's what you do. You ask questions so well. I always like how you think about the world and the questions that you ask. And I felt like, my gosh, I would never get tired of the way you're looking at the world and the way you're asking random questions that I don't ever think about. But then when I think about them, we always have a good conversation, and we always get something out of it. So, yeah.
Well, it's time for the next question then.
Okay.
Why are you so obsessed with streamlining?
I think that for some reason I am obsessed with making everything efficient. I kind of hate just doing something for the sake of doing it because someone has to do it. I would rather than take out processes or make them automated so that I don't have to do them because I just get so bored. I would rather do the stuff that I want to do. I've spent enough time doing things that I don't want to do it. We want to go back to the things that are fun for us. And by doing that, if we're going to have a long lasting podcast, then we want to make sure that we spend as much time in the fun part as possible. And that means streamlining the things that we don't. So we focus, we put a lot of time in the beginning of this now to make sure that we've streamlined a lot of things so that we can just not spend it. You imagine if we had come up with these processes in 50 episodes or 100 episodes from now, we would have spent so much loss of time and inefficiency where we could have just actually done the thing that you're here to listen to, right?
Yeah. Do you like to make spontaneous episodes?
So that was one of the things that we've learned, that the first 3 episodes that we recorded, they were basically like our spontaneous episodes. We have also, since we cut those 3, then one time, one of us had a very quick idea that we were going to record an episode without preparing for it. We were just going to record an episode, pretty much just turn on the microphone and see where we got. And where is that episode? Which episode number is that one, Udo? I forget.
Let's call it 4.5.
Oh, and where is that episode right now? Where can people listen to it, Udo?
It's in your imagination. It has been deleted from history.
Yeah, we
thrown in the trash.
What happened to it? We started recording. How far did we get in?
I think we did like 40 minutes or so, and then we had to abort the mission.
So we learned something there. What did we learn?
We learned not to do spontaneous episodes.
Why? What was the problem?
The problem was that we were not prepared, and then the quality of the conversation flow was really, really bad. We would just get stuck in the conversation and repeat things or so, or like a question wouldn't get further. So that was really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it was importance of learning how to write down our bullet pointed things so that we knew always to keep moving. And if there is no follow-up question, then we already have some other thing that we can move on to. It's just, again, another step of becoming respectful of people's time who are spending it with you and they're listening. We just want to make sure that when you're joining an episode, I have listened to maybe 10, 15, 30, actually, depending on the time frame. The last couple hours, I've been listening to 10 different podcasts. And people make the mistake. They listen to so much banter in the beginning that's like, how are you? What'd you do? And they talk about things that happened before they started recording, kind of like you and I did today. But the difference is that they were talking about inside jokes and they were talking about things that is not going to be relevant for the listener at all. And people had to sit there and listen to it. I had to listen to it for like 4.5 minutes sometimes before the actual meat and bones of the episode, the meat and potatoes rather of the episode would start. And I feel like that's disrespectful. People are not going to give you 5 minutes of time if they are a new listener, and they're going to give you a few seconds. So we always make sure that our intros have our fun little hook and intro. So you not only is it fun to listen to, right? We made it that on purpose, but also we know that these out of order clips are also going to be inside of that episode. So you also are listening to a bit of an intro to see what are you going to be exposed to and introduced to today. Kind of a clever way of doing a short little intro where someone doesn't come and listen to your jingle that they don't care about with the music they don't care about for a minute and a half before you start talking, and then it's 4 minutes of what'd you do last weekend, Bob? Have the listener in mind. We always try to do that way. So yeah, we take those interesting little parts, we make them clippable parts, and then we use those hooks for intro. Another thing, actually, Udo, that we do, which is also on this point, which is we always make every episode timeless. We always try to make it so that when people are listening to these episodes, it's going to be relevant for that person, hopefully even in that time and year, So if you're listening to this podcast, even though I know our episode might be numbered, they are not in reference to another unless we, point it out in the episode, for example. But you can just listen to any episode. If the topic seems interesting to you, click on that episode, enjoy, listen, and skip the ones that you're not that interested in. If it's going to be a topic, or just read the synopsis on there. And if it's not for you, because we talk about quite a few different things, then just go ahead and skip that episode and then catch us maybe on the next one. Yeah. But we want to make sure that timeless episodes are there so that these things, when we listen to them, going back to our why, if I was younger and I heard these episodes, I still want them to be useful to me. And I think, for example, talking about logical fallacies, that's going to be useful to the end of time, Talking about international relations, if it's something that is relevant to psychology or even our history, then we have that as an experience and data point, and we can learn from that. So then we use that. But if it's something that is, going to be about a particular kind of date that's near us, etc., then it's not going to be part of the episode because it won't be interesting in the future. So we skip those parts.
Where do you get your ideas from?
They come usually from... I sit and read every single day for probably a few hours without fail. I can't absorb enough information. I always seem to enjoy sitting there. It's just what I like to do. I usually just read nonfiction, usually things on news sites or, websites or whatever else I can think of. So I usually sit and spend quite a bit of time learning, and then those kind of ideas bounce around in my head, and then usually I'll bring it up to you and see what do you think about it, and then bounce them against you. And then that's where we get some of the inspiration for some of these episodes as well. I also had leadership class for work. I've had a couple of leadership classes as well. And I remember I was sitting in that classroom learning also some of those things that I learned and looked at really applied also to our podcast. For example, what we talk about as WOW, as they say, as a way of working. We realized in leadership class, many people will be familiar with this. It's a common example. You talk about an iceberg and you say how much of that iceberg is on above the water and how much is below the water. And you're looking at an iceberg, most people will be aware that most of the iceberg is going to be below the water, which is the subconscious, and then the stuff that you see and show above water is the conscious. And we realized that because we are listening and talking and doing this kind of what felt like show and tell on this podcast, we realized that it didn't come across as genuine as we were hoping it to come across for whatever reason. And then we went back and looked at our whys of why we do this podcast and really looked at is our subconscious that we're sending out in line with our conscious? Do we really believe the things that we're saying? Because people can tell. People are very good at discerning when someone, and we make up that opinion ourselves, right? We each in our own make up the opinion of if that person that we're listening and talking to is a salesman versus someone who believes what they're talking about, right? And the only way we can stay truthful to that is to go back to what we really genuinely necessarily believe. And so that both complicated some of our topics for the podcast, that both complicated a little bit, because if we were not, for example, really genuinely into the material, meaning sometimes Udo and I would talk about some topic, we would be in the muse, it would be great. And then when we go to finish writing down the points, when we go to talk about it, the muse is no longer there. We're not excited about the topic anymore. We made the mistake, for example, of talking too much during the process, that by the time we were going to record, it was all rehearsed because we've already said it to each other. And so it didn't come across as genuinely a great and fluent conversation because it wasn't. I had already heard what we had talked about and vice versa. So that by the time it was on recording, we didn't have those genuine reactions anymore. We heard it and we canned the episode on that as well. It just didn't come across as truthful. We hated it, in fact. So
that's how the episode got cancelled. Episode 4.5.
So if we're going to have one that is aligned with our sending out a message that both people can feel is truthful, like, for example, why do people like some of these podcasts, like Lex Friedman, for example, because you realize that he's the same. He comes from the same ontological approach, which is curious about everything, wanting to learn and understand more, and coming at that is going to be producing value for anybody. And we hope that there's some of that and the same here, just from our point of view. Instead, we want to make sure that we continually learn. By the way, I think this is true. Actually, Google this your own. But by learning a lot, you also stave off some of that chance for dementia. Isn't that true? You have more synapses that fire, etc., and you're using your memory recall and memory retention is supposed to be good for your brainsicle all the way up in your noggin. The results from several observational studies show that people who do mental stimulating activities may have a lower risk of cognitive decline and dementia. This is the case for people who do activities in both middle age and later life. This is according to Alzheimer's Society.org.uk. Yeah, there you go. So this podcast is literally good for you. It's good for me at the very least. It stimulates me. It's really fun to learn about these topics and share with your friend and talk about. This would be, like I said, perfect for me. We just enjoy this process, whether we have 0 listeners or 100,000 people. We hope that there's people who find value in it. We sure know other things. For example, we've learned a lot. One thing that we're learning, which is the difficulty of not having a niche. We have thought about this quite a bit, goes along with our why and our mission statement of sorts that we've written. And because we like learning, that also has to be kind of where we're coming at from as a point of view as well, which is we're not experts. We're not trying to be experts, we're just coming at it from 2 curious people who are trying to figure out the answer. And because of that, we're curious about so many different things. People are always saying when you're making a podcast, you should be making it into a niche so that you attract those people. But for us, it's been difficult because we are interested in so many different topics that our niche has to be learning about the world and society and the world around you. Yeah?
Yeah.
What are some other things we had to learn? We realized that we need to think about this as kind of a schedule because we were spending quite a bit of time on this one. Spending quite a bit of time on the podcast. We realized we had to set up breaks and thinking of it as a schedule. So even that, some people might say you guys are setting up a secondary job, but we don't really view it that way. We're just realizing that if we're sitting down for a long time and we don't have these little breaks, then things are just not working as well as they could be. We had to learn that through some of our most biggest it's under one of our most memorable failures and / obstacle. He's highlighting for me that was napping for me one time. Well, you tell me the story. What happened? I come on to talk to you. We were going to start recording, I believe. We were preparing to record.
Yeah, we were preparing to record, so we had a think tank session, talking and discussing things, and I just realized that you mentally you just weren't there, and you were kind of getting angry and stuff, and I just told you, bro, just go to sleep, man. And after that, like at first you didn't take it well. And obviously, like anyone who's tired is going to be grumpy. But after you took the nap, 2 or 3 hours later, so you came back fully energized, and then we got right back to work again.
Yeah. And it was such perfect advice because, in the beginning when he said it to me, of course, I didn't take it well. And the secondary problem is also that I am not a napper. I don't take naps. If I take naps, it's because I'm sick, like right now. But even actually right now, I haven't taken any naps either. But I'm just not much of a napper. If I go to sleep, it's gonna be for 2 hours, 3 hours. It's gonna be for quite a while. I can't take these little 30-minute naps. So I was quite adverse to this, but he kind of forced me to do it. He was like, just I don't, he's like, he just sent me back on. The moment my head hit the pillow, I was out. It was the complete right answer. And I come back 3 hours later, and it was so important because if you were listening to my voice like he was realizing that I didn't sound genuine anymore. It wasn't going to be a good recording. He called it before we even spent any of the time recording it, because anyone who listening would have been hearing that, oh my God, there's something that's wrong with our communication and connection today. It doesn't sound like normal. And instead of sitting there wasting both of our time, taking that little nap was the right decision. It was difficult for me, to do. Actually, many people might be able to relate. But it's not so easy. But doing that was the right call. We came back, and then all of a sudden, we have this high energy, really fun recording that came out the best way. And the cost, it was 3 hours compared to, it would have been 2 hours of throwing away, and then it would have been 2 more hours of redoing it. It would have been 2 more hours on top of that of figuring out new questions, because we would have burned some of that material. Yeah, the cost would have been significantly higher. So yeah, super important. And as a result of that, we also kind of learned that on one of our, we're so psychotic about this, I'm joking, but on the mind map also, we realized that when I feel the best is when I'm also running regularly. And to produce the best kind of episodes, we realized that I actually kind of have to put down running as part of the day so that Udo and I would both know that on those times I might be disappearing for a little bit of time, so that I can go out for a run. So just because everything just comes together much better when I'm in good shape, and to be in good shape, we realized I have to write down running onto literally the schedule, which is kind of hilarious that way. So yeah, a little bit original in our approach, but why not? It's our schedule to make, and if we're thinking things from the ground up, actually writing running in there is kind of a thing that we both realize. If Kim doesn't go running, then he will be more grumpy, or I will have a little bit less energy, or a little bit less inspiration, and etc. So, yeah, it kind of required as part of doing the best that we can for this podcast,
What about audio quality? Who's responsible for that?
Yeah, so we as we're coming into different processes that we need to do for the podcast, we have naturally taken on different kinds of roles. Okay, and for some processes, you have offered up your services and you do them, and for other processes, I've said, I'll take those that I can do, and we try to actually really make it 50-50, and I think we do pretty good on that. But when we have deviated from our roles, we have had errors. And one of the things we've realized is that, for example, I suffer from something called misophonia. Misophonia means the literal hatred of sound, which means, for example, if for some people, they don't like hearing the sound of a fork scraping against a porcelain plate, for example. That sound that you're thinking of right now might give you goosebumps. If it gives you goosebumps, that's a normal reaction. But if you get it into the point where with anything, if it becomes a point where it's excessive and it actually hinders some of your regular functioning, it becomes misophonia. Okay, I have self-diagnosed myself for this. This is not an official diagnosis, but I really suffer from really annoying audio sounds. For some reason, just very sensitive to it. And we've on one hand, okay, as a negative thing, I've banned Udo from ever chewing in my ear. Every time he eats, he has to mute his microphone, because I get actually irrationally angry about it. So he has always respected that. Thank you very much, Udo. And it's one of the negatives of me having this annoying thing. The benefit we've realized, though, that can be harnessed for the podcast, which is, I have an ear for when our audio sounds really bad. It really also bothers me. It could be all the way from lip smacking sounds to an audio sound or a pitch in the background, or to one of our microphones being put at the wrong level, etc. And Udo does not have this ear. He does not at all hear the difference between two audio qualities. He doesn't hear the difference between clicks and claps and background noises. It's just not something that he can hear or pick up. So for me, it's been very obvious. Very quickly, we realized that I have to kind of quality assure the audio for all of the episodes, and then that's quite time consuming. And as a return, thank you. You have always been the one who kind of makes the adjustments as we need.
Like the editing.
Like the editing of it. And how did we learn this? Well, we had, I don't even remember what we did now, but we had uploaded the beginning episodes onto our RSS feed, which is the feed that feeds all of this audio to all of these different places you can listen to the podcast on. And we had I don't remember, but we had errors in the audio being with the intro being on a completely different audio level than the rest of the podcast. And he had uploaded this, and we had agreed on the process of what he was going to do. And then I went to bed and then thinking that he had done it, and then we uploaded it. And then when I went to listen to it, I realized that the audio was like half the level compared to the other part. And I was like, how could this have happened? And we had to sit there and re-audio engineer all of the audio until kind of I was happy about the levels being equal and sounding good. Because, yeah, we learned that day that if we're making something, it always has to go through kind of an okay process by the other person so that these things don't happen and we're missing these integral little mistakes. We try to be as professional as we can. So we've introduced these things to make sure we don't have more of these audio failures, hopefully. Another fun one we did was we redid all the intro not only once on most of these episodes because of audio engineering, but we also redid it a couple of times because we realized that some of the audio we had used in the original intro was probably copyrighted to a different company, and we had and as we launched them, we realized, okay, this is probably, we don't actually know if this audio is usable. Sure, it was just a tiny second or two or like a couple of seconds of audio from the game, but we figured it probably doesn't belong to us, so we had to remove all that intro, and we made a version of it that we recorded just ourselves between you and I, but we never did really agree on how to make it sound so that it sounded close enough to the real thing where people could figure out what we were referencing, but also different enough to where we weren't going to get some kind of trouble with the law. So it never did. We haven't released that yet. Maybe it'll come in an intro in the future. We'll see. It'll be like an Easter egg for you guys, yeah, to look out for. if and when it ever comes.
What are moments you like to remember?
I really like recording and thinking and writing about some of these topics that we've talked about. I really enjoy spending time on this podcast. Even though you spend so much time on it, it doesn't feel like work. It always feels like just enjoyable things. And some of, we have been getting really great feedback from our listeners so far, right? We would say that we've probably had about 20 plus probably reviews, unofficially, from just friends and family and people that we know that were giving us, great feedback on things to improve and things to work on. But people have really been really sweet to us. So I think those have been some nice moments to remember, listening to people and telling me, talking to me about some of the topics we talked about on the episode. People actually write me on the Discord already, and I get to have nice conversations with people that I don't know maybe so well, but they have listened to me and my opinions, and your opinions on the podcast, and they wanted to share theirs. And it's just been so lovely. So those are those are things I like to remember. Invaluable, really. It's been really cool to hear. And getting 100 listeners in our first month. We actually got 100 listeners in our very first launch. Literally a few days before it was going to tick over to. We launched our podcast the 1st of September in 2024, and right as it was about to tick over to October, we had already beaten and gotten our first 100 listeners in the first month. So that's just unbelievable. I really like that so far we have what I would probably say outperform as well on our average results. We've gotten really above average results, like I said, by being we feel like you and I don't want to speak for you, but you tell me if I'm wrong, but you and I feel like we have just started this podcast. And most podcasts have already ended by now. That's almost hard for you and I think, to believe. And we have probably never felt really average in any aspect of both this podcast, but in life either, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like you belong to the majority of the bell curve when it comes to, I don't know, everything? Or do you feel like you are a bit more of an outsider?
Yeah, I'm just really socially awkward. So I'm actually surprised that we have a podcast. Really surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, you talked yourself into a podcast, buddy.
And here I am thinking about how the hell did I get here?
And also, I guess the last one is we were talking about the muse and summoning the muse, and Udo, he doesn't say muse all the time. He sometimes his German kicks in, it says moose. So we AI'd, right? What that moose that would be summoning the muse would be looking like, and what his name would be. And so we have created into the world Manny the Moose. So one of my highlights of this podcast also has been enjoying Manny the Moose. He's a moose with a red flannel. He looks Canadian, kind of, playing a guitar in the snow. And he's trying to summon the muse. That's what he's doing with the guitar, of course, obviously. So, and actually, Manny the Moose got over 300 listens on our YouTube Shorts. He's one of our best performing ones so far, as a recording of this episode. So, yeah, 300 plus listens on YouTube Shorts on Manny the Moose, trying to summon the muse.
Yeah, the analogy is basically you can either summon the muse, that's when you get good ideas, or you summon the moose, Manny the Moose, that's when you get ideas that suck, that are just stupid. And it's a 50-50. Like sometimes you get good ideas, sometimes you get bad ideas, but nevertheless, you still have to sit down and wait for something to happen, for ideas to come to your mind.
For me, it's the fact that we are in control of the summoning the moose. We can set down a schedule, and we can sit there, and we've made these different sessions. We've actually even named these different sessions where we work on various different things on the podcast, and we're in control of those. We're controlling how much time we spend on the podcast and how many sessions we sit down and what frequency, right? And what we're not in control of is if that inspiration is going to come, if we're going to summon the muse. So for me, Manny the Moose, we can summon him a bunch of times. Then we hope that eventually, he starts playing and we get inspired and we have great conversations that come from that. But yeah, you have to sit down and summon Manny, because that's the one that's the one we can control, which is just sit there until we get something that we feel like we want to produce and talk about and enjoy. So what about you? Do you have any moments you like to remember? Anything that you have gotten so far?
It sounds kind of paradox, but when we got hacked, I think like that was a phase where we were pretty down, but we learned a lot from that. I think that was very valuable. Like a feeling of like things basically completely crashing down over the span of like 3 or 4 days, and then realizing actually it was good that it happened so early, because if that would have happened when there was a bunch of money linked to our accounts, then that would have been really, really bad. If we would have realized the importance of cybersecurity later, then that might have been ended up pretty badly. So I'm glad that happened early.
The secondary thing you were telling me also yesterday was that it strengthened our relationship as well, strengthened the bond also, because we were forced to go through a lot of trust there. And that also made a difference for you somehow, yeah? Tell me more.
Yeah, that's I think friendships and relationships only really show when shit's happening. What is the saying that real things are forged through fire? Something along those lines. You can only really tell a real friend when the two of you go through fire together, and you still end up covering each other's backs. Because someone who can't trust, well, that person is just going to leave if things get tough. But if you see that your friend is powering through together with you, then that's a sign of a true friend.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, I feel the same way. Likewise. That was, yeah, absolutely. Super important. Do you have any other moments you like to remember, or any other achievements or milestones that you like to reminisce or think about? Not reminisce. We just started. That's not the right word. But are things that you've enjoyed so far?
Okay, the thing is, I just wanted to tell you that I forget a lot of things. So it's hard for me to remember. But that's actually a thing to remember. That I forget a lot of things. And a lot of times when that's happening, when both of us are joking, oh yeah, whenever Kim is drunk, then it kind of influences me, and then I start forgetting things. And then although we're a couple hundred kilometers away from each other, it still affects me, and I still kind of get a positive effect from it without paying for it.
I think another part that I really like is when we have a conversation, and for some reason, part of the reason why you are a robot as your image is because one day I called you a clone.
Oh shit! Yeah.
Because for some reason I perceive Udo as having a very a large lack of experience. I feel like he's come out of a vacuum sometimes, and there's so many things that should be kind of in his world of knowledge and realm of no, but it's not, because he's so hyper focused about his stuff that he likes that he misses a lot of these real life experiences. So
like, for
sometimes,
example,
like,
how and when did you notice that?
oh, I can't remember any
Gelato.
right. Oh, on gelato. Okay, so yeah, I had begun some kind of conversation about gelato to eat some, and I was talking about the different kinds of gelato there are and how there should only be natural colors. And if you see the colors of gelato that are really popping, and there's lots of those colors, you know that those are artificial, because there should only be a few natural colors, and those colors are not like lime green. Okay, they're more yeah, earthy, if you will. And I remember saying all this as like hoping to impress him and hoping for him to be like, oh, that's good. And then I know which ones are like the real gelato stands and which ones are not so good. But that's not what his answer is. His answer is, what's gelato? And I had gone through this whole speech about how to identify and what's and I was like, so I had to go back so many steps and explain what language that is, what it is, how to get a hold of it, what it tastes like, and blah. And I realized he's a clone. He was just invented like last year, so he doesn't have these experiences. So how can he know? And yeah, that's been kind of a thing you've taken on since then, both as your avatar for the podcast, which is hilarious. But also, it's true. I'm still convinced that you are a clone. So anyway, moving on. The other cool thing that I think about this podcast is that so far people have listened to, and I know this is going to be just a number we're going to laugh at in the future, but so far we're so thankful that you guys listen to us. So people have spent over 200 hours listening to just a few episodes, a handful of single digit amount of episodes, and people have already spent over 200. So out there in the world, Udo, what does that feel like that there are people out there who have 200 hours worth of knowledge more about you and I than the other way around, because we haven't met some of our listeners, for example, but they
I have
know
no idea.
quite.
surreal, just surreal.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's such an honor because we have no right to that much attention, but it is absolutely amazing that we do. And 200 hours spent with us for which is just people listen. The way I view the people's listening time is that like this: what's the most valuable thing we have is like first our health, right? And then the second thing is basically time, and people are spending time with us because out of their own free will because they feel like there's something to gain from this. That's unbelievable, to be really honest with you. How could someone repay that? I mean, how could you not feel like that is such a big honor that people are willing to? So again, the way we try to repay that the best we can is always be mindful of your time and try not to waste it because we value how important it is.
Yeah, to me it's really surreal. Like we have on each episode we have at least 10 listeners, and I literally can't imagine like 10 people listening to us on a regular basis. That's I feel like that's more people than I talk to in a week or so.
Yeah, if you were to put those people in front of us and then they're just staring at you for 200 hours, you'd be creeped out. But yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm really thankful for each listener.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. We actually we're trying not to be obsessed with the numbers, but how could you not be when we notice each and every person who listens? It's so cool. And another thing, of course, what we've already talked about a little bit, which is at the end of the day, we just get to talk to each other. We're getting a reason to talk to my friend about interesting stuff. So we will continue doing the podcast and enjoy that, and hope you guys enjoy the coming along with us. So feedback.
So talking about our listeners, we would like to get more feedback from you guys. Be as honest as possible. Just write it down in the YouTube comments or write us on Discord. We are very thankful for feedback, any kind of constructive criticism.
And aligning our subconscious with the conscious, we really do mean that. We want that critical feedback coming back. We don't want the pats on the back if it's not deserved. And we want to know what we can do better. What you guys want to hear from us, right? What topics are interesting? What are things that we can consider so that we can do it better? We lead by example. So if it's good information, good data, we will absolutely consider it and implement it. And, if you think it means other people are also thinking it, which means please tell us. It might be obvious to you, but we might be missing that point. And if it's bothering you or if it's something that could be done differently or better, then chances are other people will agree with you. And therefore, we would also like to look at that. So sometimes you can't see the forest for all the trees. And we're too close to listening. We've done too many hours of this podcast that it's a bit difficult to take that 10K helicopter view and zoom out because we are in it and talking about these things each and every single day almost. So that's we would love also if not only give feedback to us on however you can, but also if you could share this episode or share the podcast or share something. Remember that the episodes are not in order of any kind. So if you see a topic or one of the episodes and you think you can think of somebody who really might enjoy that episode, send that episode over to them. And that's one of the biggest ways you can help our podcast. We would be so thankful for that. People, we would not ask for reviews and things. It doesn't seem like asking for reviews is that important, but if you guys could share an episode with someone you think would be appreciative of it, then that would be exponential growth for us, and that would mean that we can produce more episodes and hopefully get to do this full time. That's the goal of this podcast. This is not going to be a hobby for you and I, but rather I would really like to do this with 40 hours to have and dedicate. And in the future, we have realized that some of the things that also could help grow us would be if we do something called cross-pollination. It's when you have someone who is a podcast guest come to ours and then we go to their podcast. And that's something that we've really been enjoying. We had Dina on the podcast. We really thoroughly enjoyed her company, and we would like to invite other people also to come on so that we can get more interesting discussions from not us. If this podcast is to be successful, you're not going to only want to hear Udo's and my voice. We talk enough already as is. It would be much more interesting to get different people on here that could, give us some kind of information, and we'll do that by asking good questions. And we're really looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ina was just a regular person that we met on the Discord server, Agram Zone. We were just playing games, and she's a really interesting person to talk to, and I hope that in the future we will have more interesting guests to talk to. Maybe even listeners, maybe even you, person who's listening right now.
Absolutely. So we're thinking about this long term. We've said many times before. So where do you see us in 2 years, Udo? Where's this podcast?
I see us interviewing one of our listeners together on the Discord server. And after that, we will have after hours discussions about things that we find interesting.
And hopefully I'll be doing this full time on the podcast as well. That would be a great time if we could figure out how to really, because the podcast as in its current form takes up a certain amount of hours and we dedicate it to what we have. But if we could somehow allow one of us, probably me more likely, to be able to do this 40 hours, then we could then dedicate a lot more hours towards, for example, having podcast guests on that have just released a book, and I get to have 2 weeks to read that book and come prepared. And in the current form that we have it right now, there just wouldn't be enough hours in a week that would allow me to prepare that much that as I would like to. So that would be something that we see ourselves in the 2 years. So we hope to achieve that ambitious goal. We are also looking at creating what we are calling YouTube briefs. We are going to start creating 15 to 25 minute little videos on different topics. We have started recording some of these together already, Udo and I, and we find them really, really fun. The benefit of this is that they come off really genuine, and we are really in the flow, and it'll be on usually like a topic or two, and then that's it. And we will release those on YouTube and see how those kinds of things perform as well there. So we're always experimenting with trying to get the podcast out there in the world. But yeah, those have been really, really fun and enjoyable. Right, Udo? How do you think, what's your thinking on the YouTube briefs so far?
Yeah, just a message to the listeners. I'm looking forward for you guys to listen to more of our content. And that's it for today's episode. See you guys next time.
See you on the next one.